Well, hello. I'm George Hu. I am a clinical psychologist and the chief of mental health at United Family Pudong Hospital. And I'm here with Dr. Laura Jordhen, who is the chief of family medicine at United Family Pudong Hospital. It's really great to talk to you.
All right. Well, thank you. So I'm happy to share my tips about how to stay healthy, how to keep your home healthy. And I've been practicing here in China for 4 years now, from the U.S., and I'm very happy to share what I know.
Awesome. Thank you so much. As I said, I'm a psychologist, so I'm a bit more focused on mental health, particularly in this very unique time in China, how to keep up and improve even the mental health of ourselves and also those of our families. And I think we're in a very particular time right now, including the fact that so many people are stuck inside. We're outside in a very beautiful day, but I think one of the big questions for people is, can I go outside? Is it safe to go outside? If I do go outside, what should I do to protect my own health and that of my family? Do you have any practical tips on how to offer adults, kids, families, some advice on how to keep themselves safe?
Sure. So I get a lot of questions about masks, and in my other talk I spoke particularly about which kinds of masks to use in what setting. But I do want to reassure you that the surgical masks like these are safe to protect you from the droplet spread, and that we believe is the main way that the virus is transmitted. So some people are worried that they don't have the N95, they don't have the really heavy duty mask. But that, in a setting like this, where you're outside, you're far away from people, you're really not at risk from particles that are just hanging in the air. Your risk is going to be from somebody right near you within a couple of meters, sneezing, coughing. So if you're outside, you're with 6 feet, 2 meters away from other people, you can be confident that that's a safe place to be. Especially with little kids who maybe aren't going to keep their masks on as well as you'd like. If you're in an open area going for a walk, you can feel really safe about that when you're far away from other people.
Great. There's been a lot of pictures and memes circulating the internet, of people wearing all kinds of getup, right? Covering their entire body sometimes wearing plastic water bottles over their heads. What's your opinion? I hear you with the masks. Should we be taking other precautions? Should people be wearing goggles or gloves? Do you feel like that's necessary?
So intact skin is a really phenomenal barrier. So you're not going to absorb any infection through intact skin. Where people get sick is if they touch their eyes, they touch their nose. So if you're within that 6-foot range of somebody who sneezes right in your face, theoretically, yes, could that impact you? But again, if you're in an isolated area where you're out in the open, you're really going to be well protected. So it's keeping the hands clean that's key. So one of the things to really address is now when you come back, what are you going to do? So you've come back to your house. What I'd suggest is you have your hand sanitizer right at the door. So you would remove your footwear, sanitize your hands right after that. Remove your children's footwear. And then sanitize your hands. You're going to remove jackets and leave those near the front. And again, you can sanitize again. The last step is going to be removing your child's mask and your mask with your nice clean hands. And then again, after that final step, now, once again, after every layer, basically you do the hand hygiene to keep yourself protected, to keep the germs you don't want outside, and keep your loved ones healthy.
Wow, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah. A question that I've seen a lot of people ask is, okay, so we've sanitized our hands, we've removed the mask, what do we do? Yeah, holding the earlobes. Great point. Hold the earlobes to remove. Should we throw them away? Can we reuse them? Can we ask the kids to reuse them? What do you think?
Yep. So I actually saw a paper on this from Pudong University saying that you can sanitize a mask by wrapping it in plastic and using a hairdryer on it for 30 minutes. Now,
30 minutes?
Yeah.
Oh, that's
now,
a long time.
That's an ordeal. Now, Could you, in fact, you've been outside, you've been in an environment with no other people around, the risk of you actually having any infectious disease on the outside of your mask is nil. In the hospital, we use the N95 for up to 4 hours continuously. Now, if you've not been exposed to the virus, you take it off safely. The risk of actually having infectious particles on that when you've been out in an open area is really low. Now, the virus doesn't live on surfaces forever. I don't have any data on this to say, is this safe? But theoretically, if you were to alternate masks, if you were to keep a mask in a nice warm area, you can place it in a paper bag, 48 hours later, the chance of having any really significant disease on that mask is very low.
I see.
So at this time where if your choice is to stay inside always to conserve your mask supply, or perhaps go outside in an uncrowded area where you're not really at risk for exposure, and consider rotating some masks, it would seem reasonable to rotate masks because your risk would be very, very low in that setting.
Yeah, that makes sense. Keeping with the theme of a safe home, for so many of us right now at this particular time, it feels like the home is like the only place that's safe, But there has been concern recently about, is the home safe and how can we keep the home safe, particularly around questions like, does the virus come up through the drain pipes? Or is it safe to get a Kuaidi delivery from outside into your home, or food delivery, in which many of us are probably depending on food deliveries a lot more than we used to? Is it safe to welcome those items into the home?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up the question about the drains.
Yeah.
We do know it's possible that similar viruses can be spread through a sewage system. We don't know yet about the COVID-19, but theoretically, yes. So really good practice is to make sure all the U-traps in the drains are always full of water. The drains in the floor of the bathroom may not, in fact, be getting water in them regularly unless you actively make sure you're pouring water in the drain at least once a week. So that's a good practice.
Yeah.
Now, before this virus existed, we know that food preparers are practicing good hygiene. There's other diseases like hepatitis A that have always been a threat, and so we know that through good sanitation, fecal oral diseases that can be spread with poor hygiene, can be absolutely avoided with good kitchen preparation, and that's why there's licensing and public health. And so I wouldn't fear that your food from a reputable restaurant or delivery would be an issue at all.
Okay.
That's going to be well wrapped before it comes to you. And then you'll take your package, and you can certainly take off the outer wrap, wash your hands, and then take out your delivery and feel really comfortable about that.
Great. In keeping with the food theme, I was at a burger restaurant the other day, and this was a burger restaurant in which you could order, I guess, the degree of wellness to which the burger was cooked. And this brought up another thought for me. In this time, is it more safe to order things well done? Is it more safe to stay away from things like raw fish or sashimi? What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah. So it's having well-cooked meat is always a good idea to avoid things like E. coli and other bacteria. Yes, you would want to make sure any meats are well-cooked. I've not seen any data linking the sashimi with the COVID-19, but it would make sense that right now you'd want to be eating well-cooked foods.
Okay. Great. Any other ideas that you might have about how to keep our families and our citizens safe during this time? Like, what would any other sort of like general recommendations that you have?
So connecting with people, and I know you're going to talk about that more. Yeah, but your immune system depends on your emotional well-being.
So true.
Yeah, so making sure you're connecting with people. Physical activity is really important. If you're not able to go outside, putting on some goofy music and dancing, watching exercise videos.
Jumping jacks.
Exactly,
Yeah.
it's all good.
Yeah.
So maintaining your physical health, your healthy diet, your exercise, your connection with other people, that's really critical. With the really careful steps like we talked about with the hand hygiene, with the social distancing, you can absolutely protect yourself.
Yeah. Wonderful. One last question. I've been seeing a lot of questions about public transportation. Is it safe to use the subway? Is it safe to get in a taxi? What are some precautions that you would take before you get into a public transportation mode?
So be aware of what you're doing with your hands.
Okay.
I believe you could probably get through an entire subway trip without touching anything. If you have a seat, you're not holding on to the pole. But be mindful of where your hands are and make sure that you're not absent-mindedly rubbing your face. Your electronics. Be aware that your electronics, if you've been touching a lot of surfaces, can also transmit disease. At least at this moment, the crowds are light and you're not going to be in very close proximity with people. But the mask wear, yes, you'd be wearing a mask on public transport because it's required. If you've been in an environment that is more crowded, then you would want to be mindful about that mask. And could the outside of the mask actually be a surface that you'd be aware of, and would you want to then dispose of that mask completely? It would be a very different risk than going for a walk on an empty street, say. Yeah.
And I would assume that the same types of precautions would apply to the workplace environment, right? As more and more people, perhaps this week and next week, are going back to work, going into offices and office buildings. Would you say that you would have similar suggestions for the office?
Yep, exactly. So social distancing at the office, consider not shaking hands. And consider
a virtual high five.
Yeah, virtual high five. For hand hygiene, consider maybe not wearing your ring if you're so inclined. Meals, distancing at meals, because you're not going to be wearing a mask at the table. So you can see we're wearing a mask because we're within a meter of each other. But consider a little more space when you're eating, and making sure to perform that hand hygiene before you eat is really critical. But getting back to work for a lot of people, I think, is going to feel really good. To feel productive, to see your colleagues. So I think that's going to be a real relief for a lot of people getting back to work and having that social contact.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for answering the questions. And I really, because I think these are such important and practical questions for people. These are very real questions that people have at this time. So thank you so much. You brought up something that's so relevant for myself, which is emotional health, particularly related to getting outside. So I really appreciated what you said about safe ways that we can get outside, safe ways that we can keep up our daily physical exercise, because there's so many corollaries between those things and mood. Cabin fever is such a real thing.
Yes, exactly.
Particularly if there's cabin fever and then there's cabin fever with kids, where the entire family has cabin fever, and that can be really distressful and really emotional. This is a time when I think a lot of parents are called on not only to be the parents that they always were, but also to sub in as a teacher, to sub in, and to maybe a lot of us perhaps have had domestic help that may not be there anymore. And so people have had to get used to a whole new way of living. And that's really, really hard. So I really appreciated what you said about that. Yeah.
I see right now parents are having to really project confidence to their kids and kind of are 24/7 on duty now to show that they're calm and confident, even if they don't feel it. What suggestions would you have for parents, for people to connect, and how to get those feelings out in a way that is not going to upset the kids.
Yeah.
What would you say about that?
That's so interesting because it's this whole theme of safety that's going on right now, right? Starting with how can we keep ourselves safe physically from the virus, but also emotionally. I think as parents, we often burden ourselves to create this world for the kid that is completely sanitized, both, from any sort of biochemical agents, but also sanitized like emotionally, where we want to almost create a fantasy world around a child that's completely Disneyland, that in which there's no like expression of negative emotion, and that's just not real life, for most people. And so I would say don't be afraid to let your emotions show. Don't be afraid to model for your kids an appropriate expression of emotion, whether that emotion is fear, disappointment, anger, sadness, joy, anything. There are appropriate ways in which people express these very real emotions, and we can model that for kids. Because at some point they're going to grow up and they're going to realize, okay, the real world isn't Disneyland, and I have to adjust to that.
Wow.
I have to know I have to know what I do with this feeling inside myself that's called anger.
Wow.
Or that's called fear.
Wow.
And unless that's modeled for us, we often don't know where to go with that, or we turn to other models like media, which could have all kinds of examples, right? That some are good, some are not so great. So it's best for parents to really do that. And you can do that in conversations with your child in an age-appropriate manner. Say, you know what? Mommy or daddy is feeling really scared right now. And this is what we do when we're scared. This is what I do when I need to feel safe or I want to feel safe. Right? And we can teach, and we can kind of do both. This is how I express my fear, but this is how I gain or regain a sense of safety. And then it can be a conversation like, how can we regain safety for you? What are some things in which you feel safe doing? And we can try it together. Yeah.
That's really powerful. Yeah, to release the burden of having to create a perfect environment for your little kids. That's really
the pressure of the perfect.
That takes a lot of pressure off. That's great. Thank you for that.
Perfect,
That's great. Thank you.
Yeah. I think another issue, that people are struggling right now is how to assist with their own sense of frustration. I think it's such a particular time. People are inside, people are stir crazy, people are wearing these multiple hats, and everyone's tempers might be razor thin, right? Frustration tolerance abilities might be low. Maybe they weren't ever so great, and so this is a time when I think we have to actively, not passively, take care of our mental health. We need to do some things that maybe we weren't used to doing before because we weren't under the same degree of demands, right? We didn't have the same type of demands on us. So one of the things that I really suggest, because right now there's so much focus on negativity, there's so much focus on danger, on risk, to bring some of the focus on the other side, right? Safety, confidence, gratitude. These are things that we can actively turn our consciousness toward, to try to counteract the stuff that's around us, quote unquote, in the air, both literally and physically and figuratively, right? One of the things that I've suggested, and many other professionals have also suggested, is to start a gratitude journal. Just to note even as simple as 2 bullet points a day of things that you're grateful for, and they could be anything. A small thing, like, oh, I don't know. As soon as I went on DD, I got a cab within 1 minute, which rarely happens, right? Like, they could be something small, but it just turns our focus to that, to something that we're grateful for. The only rule I would say in the gratitude journal is try not to repeat things you're grateful for. If you've done the DD thing one day, try to come up with something different the next day. Yeah.
Oh, that's great. That's a great point. I do know that there are a lot of kids who are really happy to have mom and dad's attention full time. So there's certainly some good moments with families. Maybe more moments with families than you were expecting, but to look for those things to be grateful for is really important. And I think there are really steps that you can take to protect yourself. You're not helpless in this. And I think that's another really important message, that you really can protect yourself with your where you go, how you re-enter the home safely, how you prevent transmission. So yeah, I think we can look at, I think we're not helpless in this,
That's such a
in
great
staying
point.
healthy.
Yeah, especially because, like I said, the focus is so much on risk right now that like it's very important to remember we're not. It may not be as bad as we fear,
Yep.
right? We're not as helpless as we fear. Yeah. Dr. Laura, I just want to thank you so much for, taking part of this conversation and sharing so many good tips with us on how to keep ourselves and our families and communities safe. And, I think it's amazing how much of what you shared had so much to do with the mental health side of it too. So thank you so much.
Absolutely, thank you. I think I'm gonna really make a push to do that gratitude journal myself. So thanks for the reminder. I love it. So yeah, as we know, the physical health and the mental health are completely intertwined, and taking care of one takes care of the other. Yeah.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. Thanks.
All right.
武汉加油，中国加油！